Hi everyone, this is Tabetha from Landt Creative Space in Denver, and this is my studio. Welcome. Today I would like to talk to you about substrates. What the heck are substrates? Well, in the world of painting, when we're talking about a substrate, we are talking about the surface that you paint on. So I'm just going to go over some of the more common ones and the more easily accessible ones, especially for beginners and students. So the first one is paper. So this is actually a mixed media pad. I like to paint my covers. This is an art journal that I kept on my Phenomenal Women Retreat in Oaxaca, Mexico last year, or this year. Gosh, a couple months ago actually. It feels like last year. But what's nice about paper is you can use watercolors. You can use acrylics like watercolors because you can really water down the acrylics. You can use acrylics at full strength. You can write. I like to journal and paint over my words. You could do mixed media in here. There's lots of stuff you can do if you're keeping an art journal. If you don't want to paint in the journal, you can tear out a sheet, and in which case I'd get one with one of those perforated page lines there, and take it out, and I would recommend you tape it down to a board. You can use some of that blue painter's tape, and it will give you a nice border around the painting when you're done, and almost, sort of frame it like this. I would advise you to get the heaviest paper you can. Watercolor paper is great. Mixed media paper is a lot more affordable, but it does tend to buckle when it's wet. Although in this journal, this is mixed media paper, and it was fine. So, it's a little bit warbly. You can see on the edges there, but it's not too bad. It depends on what you're after. The next category is something I love to paint on, and this is what I use when I'm painting with my students, because it's easily stored, and this is a canvas pad. This is the Artist Loft brand, but there's all kinds of brands out there. And let's see, 5-ounce unprimed and 8-ounce primed. Great for oil and acrylic painting. I'm not sure why it says unprimed, because this is primed. So primed, by the way, just means that it's got a coating on it that will resist the paint a bit. Not resist it, but it's going to make it so the paint doesn't soak into the canvas. If you used unprimed canvas, then the fabric tends to soak the paint in, and you just need more paint to cover it. So this is what I do. Sometimes I paint directly on the pad, and of course it goes over the edges and sticks the pages together, but that's okay because they just pull right apart. Sometimes, usually. The other option, if you wanted to paint directly on the pad, is that you can get a bigger piece of paper, or just, any piece of paper, and stick it in between the pages sticking out of the pad, so that you paint onto the paper instead of onto the side of the pad. So this is what it looks like. It's flimsy, flexible. It's primed on one side and raw on the other side. That's probably what they meant on the cover. And I like it myself. And when I'm not painting with it on the pad, I do tape it down to a board, and that's actually, so you can see here, this is where I tore out the canvas paper from the canvas pad and taped it down, and then I painted over it because I did a class. I'm painting with a class, and I don't always save those, so I paint it right over it, turned it white, it's ready for another painting. Okay, that brings me to the third substrate, which is board, hardboard. You can either buy a big sheet of this at the hardware store and have them cut it up for you, or cut it up yourself, or you can buy little pre-cut panels at a craft store and paint on these. These are, it gives you a nice smooth surface, and I should be showing you this way. It gives you a nice smooth surface. You can either prime it with some gesso, or you can just, honestly, I just paint on it raw sometimes because I like having that dark background. Easy peasy. The downfall to these is that you can't handle it because the edges will be wet, so you have to sort of wait for it to dry before you can handle it. And also, it doesn't dry as quickly because it doesn't breathe. So those are the two downfalls, but it's affordable and it stores really flat. Some of the issues I know that my students have, they paint a lot and their paintings tend to stack up and they don't know what to do with them. They give some away. So if you're not wanting to sell your work, or you're not at that place yet, this is a great option, you know, these boards, because you can always just store them flat or paint over them, keep painting the same board. The next option is a canvas panel or canvas board, depending on where you go. That's what this little guy in progress is painted on. Again, it's flat. This is once again the Artist Loft brand, but lots of other people make them, and it's basically like a piece of cardboard with some canvas glued onto it. And this is a great option also for beginners, for students. These come in standard sizes, so if you paint something you really like, you can just buy a frame and pop this into a frame, put it on the wall. And honestly, sometimes I will just do little tiny nails, you know, 4 little nails to put on the wall. You can lean it up on a shelf or something. It's a nice option. The next option is the most common thing that you see, which is a stretched canvas. So what that means is that a piece of canvas has been stretched over stretcher bars, and you can buy the canvas separate from the stretcher bars and stretch them yourself. But honestly, unless you have, you know, some odd dimensions that you want to do, canvas is super affordable these days. So this is what my students paint on, or what I give them to paint on when they don't bring their own supplies. And it's standard. It's standard. It's nice because you can either frame it, or, you know, you can put a wire on it, which is what we do when we sell our artwork. But also, this will just balance on a nail. If you want to hang it on your wall, it just balances like that. Easy peasy. The downfall for this is that it is thicker. And as a matter of fact, I used to do all my class demo paintings on these things. And I mean, honestly, if you look at the canvas paper compared to this thing, I can store, you know, a dozen or more of these guys in the same space that it takes to store this one. So that's why I moved to the canvas paper. One of the nice things about the stretch canvas, though, is that it does breathe. So the paint dries quickly if you like that. Some people like to keep their paint open a little bit longer. But the air can get through to it, whereas on the canvas board and the hardboard, it does not. And then the last bit is this thicker canvas. It's called a gallery wrap canvas. And this is what I like to do the work that I make to sell on, because it's more professional looking. It's just solid. There's something very sturdy about this. I really like it. It's got the double frame in the back, so it's more sturdy. And just a side note, anything pretty much you buy that's wrapped in cellophane like this has been primed. So some of my students go out and buy gesso to prime their canvases, And I mean, you can prime more, but you don't really need to. This is ready to paint on. And as a matter of fact, it says, so this says heavyweight cotton duck, which is, there's many different kinds of canvas you can buy to paint on. That's a whole other thing. Archival quality, acid-free titanium, acrylic, gesso, primed. For use with acrylic and oil paints. So that is one last tip I'll leave you with, is that I would never use watercolor on canvas unless the canvas was not primed. The watercolor will sort of not stick as well to the canvas. Watercolor needs something to soak into. I know people that do it, but I don't know. I think it's gonna flake off after a while. So if you're using the word canvas, think acrylic, think oil paint. And that's it. So what's your favorite surface to paint on? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear all about what you love to paint on. And do you gesso canvases that are already gessoed? I know someone who used to love to gesso and then sand it down, and gesso and sand and gesso and sand. I don't know. I think she said she gave her a really smooth painting surface. I don't know. And there's nothing necessarily better about a smooth surface. Depends on what you're after. If you're doing really fine detailed work, you might want a really smooth surface. Smooth surfaces are fun to paint on, but some people like the really rough canvas because it gives them more texture. It's all a personal choice. I encourage you to experiment on many different surfaces, many substrates, and let me know how it goes. Leave a comment below. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, that's it. Happy painting.